Hi, welcome to the Anika Apple Podcast. I'm Anika Apple, trusted advisor, author, and spiritual strategist. And I prepare leaders for a higher purpose and help them reconnect to the truth of who they are so that they can live a remarkable life. At this podcast, we believe that we are called to help create connections between us as community, to strengthen leaders for the path ahead, and to ensure that we understand what the divine is speaking to us. Each month, I come with a divine guidance episode of the podcast, and this is our divine guidance episode for the month of December. Now, for those of you who have been, with me on this podcast journey, you know that we've seen a lot of shift from how God would download to me in advance of the podcast to receiving themes to basically coming in and just being all out here with whatever it is that God is saying. And that is absolutely where we are today for this podcast episode. What God said to me just moments before hitting live is, this is about what you don't see. A few days ago, when I was preparing for the podcast episode, I actually had planned to live stream it 2 days ago. And God took me into scripture. And I was blown away by where God took me. And I was like, okay, if this is the message that I meant to deliver, we need to sit with this for a little bit because I need to understand where you're going. And quite honestly, as God often does, it is about being willing to be the messenger, regardless as to whether or not you have a full and complete understanding of things. And that's kind of like our lives, right? So I'm excited to be with you on the journey as God shares with us what the things are that we don't see and how we might sharpen our eyes to understand what is happening in the world around us, and perhaps more focused on who we are choosing to be in this moment where we cannot see things as comfortably as what we have in the past. Before I get started, for anyone who's new, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for being here. I receive messages from God clearly, as you can probably intuit by now, but it's important that you remember that whenever you're receiving any kind of prophetic word, that you do two things with it. First and foremost, you always want to take it back to God and ask, what is the relevance for my life? Is this a word that I should be listening to? So you want to be clear that the word is for you, and then you want to ask, how is it relevant? How would I then apply it to my life? And then the second thing that I think is so important is that we continue to sit with the words that really resonated with us and what God said, and then go back to choosing how we are going to apply those things in our life. Sometimes it is simply about sitting with the wisdom and understanding. Sometimes it's revealing something about, where you are in this current moment and how you can strengthen yourself for the journey ahead. And sometimes it's about taking concerted action again and again to change the dynamics of what you're experiencing. Whatever it is between you and God. It is between you and the pathway that you are on. So it's important for you to make sure that you're grounded in what you're doing and not just taking what people say and using your lens of what you are used to, as opposed to understanding that we are in a time where what God is calling us our attention to is different. We are not in a moment where we can allow the experiences of the past to be the determining factor for how we think things are going to go. If we do that, we will really limit what God is trying to do in the world. The other thing that's important for us is to recognize that we all have spaces that we don't see and understand. And sitting with God is the way that we get clarity and understanding. It's when we quiet and silence the things around us and the voices that are always coming to try to convince us to do something in a certain way or follow, the programming that we have been experiencing throughout our lifetimes. That takes us away from hearing the truth that is God's to deliver to us, and for you to recognize that truth within yourself. So silence, quiet, time away, journaling, those are some of the great practices that you can do to help bring yourself closer in. So that said, I want to now share with you what is flowing through me today. And this piece about what you do not see is clearly spanning, I hear you, it's clearly spanning across our soul's journey in addition to what is happening in the world around us. So first, I will tell you that I mentioned earlier that God was like, hey, I, I'm like, can you please give me some kind of like, do I even have a title? Like, do I know what this message is going to be about? And I heard Genesis 6, and I was like, So I go in and I start to explore what is in this chapter. And certainly I have read it before, and as many of you likely have too. And this is a chapter that includes the preparation for the flood. And so the story of Noah's Ark is in there, but there's a lot of really there's a lot of great insight into what happened to come to that place before we got there. So I was sitting with this message because I was like, what you talking about, Willis, right? Because if you could imagine, I typically see things, God will show me things 3 years out. In these messages, they typically are about 12 to 18 months out. And so there's certainly some, cognizance of like, the word says that, God will not return with water like flooding the earth and like the way that it happened before. However, I'm very clear that in some of the things to come, water will be a part of what happens in the world. I also know that many people have received messages and downloads across the last several years about preparation related to creating arcs or preparing for something that comes that changes the very dynamic of how we do things. There are many people talking about restarts and lots of ways that the messages of God have come back to the fact that things will change. I think that for us, even in the way that I just described it, in our humanness, we are always trying to sense make, to figure out what it is that is coming. How can we best parallel it to something that we know of? But in this case, we simply won't know and will not be able to see anything beyond what God shows us. So what do you do if you don't know what's coming, but you know that there's some level of preparation that has to happen? And what I would say to you is then you are required to come back and focus on what's happening on the inside of you. There's some very, practical ways that we prepare ourselves. We think about food. We think about, do we have what we need in terms of like, is there gas in the car? Do we have all our important documents together? Like all of those kinds of things, right? So there's practical things to do. But beyond those things, like once you have done those things, once you have a plan, once you are, clear about the things God has been saying to you, then what's next? It's always going to come back to you. So the question that I would pose to you in this moment is, what are you not seeing about yourself? There is a ton of information on the inside of you that is waiting for you to realize it, to recognize it, to understand yourself in a way that allows you to operate in alignment with who you were created to be. Your purpose is locked on the inside of you. The puzzle piece that you bring to the whole that is us as community is locked on the inside of you. And in some cases, the behaviors that bubble up, particularly at this time of year, They come from a place that is locked in disappointment, frustration, trauma, like all of those things. And the question that I would ask of you is, are you looking truly within yourself to know what it is that is driving you to behave in the ways that you do? An example that is flowing to mind right now is when you are ready to receive more abundance, right? Like I know so many people who are like, I've been doing the work, I've been doing the things, I've been, surrendering all of this stuff. Why isn't this stuff happening? Why does it feel like there is a delay? But the truth of the matter is, the delay is always about us. I feel like God is always there, like, hey, I'm over here holding on to this treasure trove of all the things that I have promised you and what you have been praying about. But you have to show up as the version of yourself that's like, I'm ready for this. And what we don't see is what stands in the way of us allowing ourselves to receive. When we are unwilling to look at our responsibility in situations, when we're unwilling to look at how we contribute to the patterns that we have, when we become absorbed by looking at fault in other people, we're taking ourselves away from the truth within, and it takes us longer to reconcile ourselves to those things so that we can have what it is that we desire. In order for you to shift into this time that God has assigned for you, which for those of you who are drawn to the podcast, who know that you are walking a divine path, who understand your divine assignment, what's in the way is you. You have to let go of the hold that you have to the things that have disappointed you in the past, to the people who have disappointed you. In some case, what God is showing me right now is that for some of you, you're like holding people hostage. There are people who hurt you or disappointed you or frustrated you or you feel like treated you wrong. And it's like you're holding them hostage, like you're holding on to them so that they can't move because you're waiting for them to reconcile what you feel they did to you. But the truth of the matter is, you might see yourself as like, I'm gonna hold them, I'm holding them to what they did. I'm gonna hold them accountable for it. I'm gonna hold them, still until they bend, until they whatever. But what you're really doing is you're causing that pain on the inside of yourself. You're causing the misalignment. You're causing the delay because you're holding on to the past. You've got to let it go. Across this journey of life, people come and they have an assignment, and their assignment is to do what it says in the word. They're here to be the strength, to be the teacher, to be wisdom for you. They're here to show you what love really looks like, what it really feels like, what forgiveness is, what grace is. They have assignments to help you have an understanding of God's love, to experience this world. And you can choose to hold on to the things that are harmful and they're painful, but it will be like weights tied around your ankles as you try to run. So if you are looking towards this beautiful journey of life ahead and you're holding on to all of those things that happen, you're causing your own standstill. God says, I'm making you renewed in this season, and you want to hold on to and harbor the pain of the past. What you don't see is that your choice to keep looking back at what happened and is already done. The experiences are already part of your makeup. The wisdom is already a part of lessons you can choose to use to your advantage. They can be part of what helps you build. For many of you, the things that you're holding on to are the very things that define your ability to live into your purpose. Had I not gone through the journey that I have been on, I would not have needed to heal. And I wouldn't have created a way for you to heal. wouldn't have written this book, right, about healing. Uh, there's so much in this journey that we experience that is about us being able to step into our purpose. But we get to this point where it's like, I'm almost there, but I just can't get over it. And you can't get over it, not because you're not equipped to, not because God is not showing up for you, but because you're holding on to the things that have already been done. If you are feeling the resonance with this part of the message, then here's what I would say to you. Ask yourself what value you've gotten in the last 5 or 10 days by holding on to the anger, the hurt, the resentment, the frustration that you have for other people. And if there is something good, something that you are grateful for in it, then perhaps it's a practice that you hold on to. But if you cannot find anything good that came from holding on to it, make the agreement with yourself to let it go. Because even if you feel like, well, holding on to it, okay, Anika, I hear you. So holding on to it is just, it's making things take longer, but you don't understand. The divine appointments that are available to you, the opportunities, those things, they may not look the same. That experience that you were meant to have may be different. And most importantly, why would you choose to go another day without feeling free from those things that have already caused the impact to you in whatever ways it has been? What I know, I hear you, what I know about my journey is that when I have let go of the things of the past, God has showed me how to turn that thing into something that is joyful, that creates learning for others, that is helpful in the way that I support my clients. It is, a part of the way that I build the business. There's so many things that because I let them go, then God could show me what the real lesson was on the inside. In the meantime, you're impacting your body, your mind, your spiritual connectivity with God and your emotional self because you're holding on to these things. The other thing that's important for us to know is there is so much conversation around what's happening external to us in the world. And God is saying the world on the inside of you is your priority at this time. Then the world should extend to that immediate world right around you. The things that are at what we would call like the macro level, that stuff is important, but it is not your priority. God is saying, leave that to me right now. The question that I pose to you is, what will you do? What is in alignment in your heart? What do you care about? What are you focused on? What are you committed to? Because that's the thing right now that God is looking at, that God is assessing. Where are you in alignment with your heart? Where are you in alignment with how you're treating people in accordance to what you know God has called you to do? Where are you with living into your purpose? That's your first step. The second is the importance of building healthy community. And we talk a lot about community in the podcast because what God has shown me and told me over and over again is the way we heal, the way we grow, the way we create the new systems, processes, etc. in the world. The way we get to thriving is through community. And communities are meant to be built with people who have a variety of experiences, who want to contribute in a myriad of ways, and also want to learn from others in that community. So it's important for us to be thinking about the way that we take care of one another. And what God is saying in this moment is what you don't see is the pain that your neighbors are going through. What you don't see is the pain that your children, that your parents are going through. What you don't see are the things that people are wrestling with that you have already overcome. Sometimes in our silence, in our desire to be like, I've arrived, I got here, I figured it out, I made it through, I'm on the other side, we think that we're not supposed to talk about the things that were painful and harmful for us. But the truth the truth could not be more clear. It is so important for us to share those stories and have those conversations and bring people along on the journey, that is how they are then able to say, oh, it's okay to be in this place. I can think like I have so many examples of this like rushing in. And one of the ones that's really prominent for me in this moment is that a family member was, looking through some like doing a variety of information gathering for a project, right? And as they were going through this information, they found some significant themes throughout the family, that like there were like a couple of different things that were just so significant. It's like, wow, everybody who's in this age group has this, everybody who has this particular dynamic of life experienced this. There's so many consistencies, and through that it really caused both of us to sit back and say, okay, so like what's the thing that now the next generation needs to know? How do we prepare them for it, right? The other thing that it did, because we're praying people, is like, now what does this open up for us in terms of prayer? What should we be praying about in relation to this for, that particular family? When we have the information about what's happening around us, we can bind ourselves together to support one another. Right now, that there are people leaving their corporate jobs in ways that are like mind-boggling, right? And we know that there is significantly more to come through the first quarter of next year. There are going to be significant layoffs. So it's not just what we have already seen this year, but there is more to come. There are more companies that are going to close. There are massive corporations that have been pillars in our societies that will close their doors through the end of next year. So with all of these things that are coming, that people might be experiencing different things, but how often do you extend yourself to have those conversations? You might be the very resource that they're looking for. You might have the very opportunity that they need. You might have the connection that will help them get to where it is that they need to go next. We have to stop moving in a way that is so myopically focused on what it is that we are going through, that we miss the opportunity and assignment that we have to one another. So yes, it's important for you to do your healing work. It's important for you to focus on what's happening to you in this season, but it's also important for you to not miss the opportunity to be of service to others. And God's point and purpose in this message is that it is for us to be focused on ourselves, the nucleus, the family, and our immediate community, not on all the stuff in the world. But if you think about it, where do we spend the most time? Even in conversations, if you flash back to, for those of you who celebrated Thanksgiving in the US or recent holidays around the world, when you go back to the time you spent with family, what were you talking about? The stuff happening globally? Or the stuff that really is happening in your own households, in your own community? It's so important for us to be focused in this moment on that nucleus. It's important for us to be focused on what is in proximity to us. God is saying, this is what I am calling you to in this moment. And I need you to let go and let me handle what is happening at a global level. That doesn't mean don't pray. It doesn't mean don't have concern. It doesn't mean, ignore it, but your energy and time. What God is showing me in this moment are like so many people who are being so, you're getting riled up about all the things that are happening in the world, and you're riled up, but then you feel like, but it's outside of my control. And God is like, because when you hand it to me, I have the thing. What I need you to focus on is how you can get riled up around what's happening in your immediate area, what's happening within your families, what's happening with your partner, what's happening with your kids, with your parents, what's happening with your best friends. What are the things that people are not talking about? And in your aligned self, you know how to ask the right questions that open the doors for people to share those things. But people are struggling and they're suffering and they're experiencing grief and they're experiencing fear and they're going through so much darkness, and you have light. You know hope. You know faith. You know what it's like to be in the valley, right? The valley of the shadow of death. And yet still remain confident that you are covered because you have that relationship. If you think about what modern day evangelism looks like, it's, I think a lot of times people feel like it's just what we do here through social media, like that's enough. But the truth of the matter is sometimes it's just sitting next to somebody. It's calling the person who pops in your mind and checking on them. And then sharing whatever God shows you in the moment, trusting what comes up from you, because that's the very thing they need to hear or experience. This is a time like no other. And I know that you desire to move in a way that is familiar, but God is calling you to do things that don't make sense. And that is important. You can consider it, a test of obedience if that's your thing. For some of you, you might say like, this is me moving into a place of just of alignment, of just doing what it is that God says. I don't feel like I'm being tested. I feel like I've arrived at this level. And for some of you, you're like, I don't even know if I should trust this, but I will. And that is faith. Like, it is just for you to do the thing that God is calling you to do and to let go and to let go. For some of you right now, you are still struggling with discerning when is it God's voice versus yours? When is it the thing that God desires for you to do versus like it's, like you're saying these your own things for yourself. At the end of the day, I will tell you that sitting with God consistently is the way that you can discern and know. You have to quiet the outside influences. You can't take everything that you hear back to other people. You need to be able to sit with them. Like when there are moments when God gives me something and I'm like, I don't get it, I go back and sit with God. And there are some very trusted people that I know I can go sit with. And what I love about them is they won't tell me what to do ever, because they recognize my gifting, just like I recognize theirs. They ask great questions. They help me pull some of the things out of me that I'm thinking, that I'm, wrestling with, like what's really the truth, what's in the way of your trusting what you know is God. And then they typically send me back to God. Your silence in sitting with God for days upon days, if that's what it takes, journaling every day, if that's what it takes, silence 2-3 times a day, if that's what it takes. That's the discipline that God is desiring for you to build in this season. Because when we get there to whatever is around the corner, we should be, if we follow what God is opening the door for us to do, we should be in such a place of confidence that we never have to worry about whether or not we are doing what God is calling us to do. Let me go back into Genesis 6 for a moment. So we know that this is where Noah builds the ark, right? And he's given instruction, but not a lot of background as to why. The world is a mess, and he knows God is calling him to do this thing. And he does what God calls him to do, despite the ridicule, despite not having a full blueprint, despite all of the discomfort that he must have had, all of that stuff. That's what God is calling us to. If you go back and read the chapter, for those of you that read the Bible, I definitely encourage you to read the chapter. For those of you that don't, that's fine. The beginning of the chapter, God is looking at everything that is happening in the earth, and it's like, this is a hot mess. Might be a little bit like what we are experiencing in these days. And he makes the decision, the declaration that he's going to start anew. This is my summary. And what is important for you to know is that there's already a restart in progress. What it looks like, how it happens, when it happens, all of that stuff, it all belongs to God. It always does. It always has. But we are equipped to navigate this time. There was so much opportunity for people to choose differently, and they didn't. And the only question that we can ask ourselves, a lot of times we want to be like, well, what are they doing? And what's happening politically? And what's happening socially? And we can look at all of these different things. But the one thing that God is going to hold you accountable for is what you chose, who you are being, what it is that you are doing, what is your alignment. One of the many things I love about God is that even when you make mistakes, even when you do things that are like, why the heck did I do that? You're asking that. God has already given you grace. You already have forgiveness. You already have the second, third, 15, 900th chance. So, getting it wrong is a thing we worry about in our humanness, but God is like, where was your heart when you made that decision? What did you think? What was the desire that you held? Were you desiring to do something that you thought would be pleasing to me, even if it wasn't exactly what I asked of you? There's grace for that. And that's a very different dynamic, is a very different dynamic than how we treat ourselves in our humanness. The grace that God provides for us extends to asking questions. I share this all the time with people that, I find that I will say, like, I argue with God. I'm not doing that. Like, no, I'm not saying that. That's not what happened this week. But I was like, I'm going to need to understand this message a little more. And I didn't. God gave me nothing more. Whatever you are hearing today is what God is flowing through me right now. And that just is what it is. At the end of the day, we are here in humanity, according to the Old Testament, because Noah did what God asked of him. And I know that even as I look through the book that I love, that even Jesus had a moment of asking God to take this cup from him. It's one of my favorite places in the book. And that for me is the reason I feel like it's so welcome by God, to ask God questions, to sit with God when you don't understand things. And you might listen to this and be like, so what does that have to do with, is there a flood coming, all that stuff? Those are your questions for God. If that's what I was here to tell you, I would tell you that. But what I know for sure is there's a lot ahead. And you do not want to be in a place where you cannot hear and trust what you know is coming through. You want to be clear that you are in alignment. And for some of you, you're like, maybe the way that you understand God is different than how some other people might describe it. But being clear about your connection to the divine, to what you believe is greater than you, that's what I'm talking about. What I love about God is that God will always create the way to make the connections happen for people who understand things differently. And our role is not to judge. We spend too much time in judgment of the decisions and how other people live their lives, and not enough time looking at ourselves. Hence the first part of the topic today, which is it is about us exploring what we don't see about ourselves. When you look deep into yourself, what you will begin to see is that the things that come up for you when you're looking at other people, the way they lead and how they treat you, and the way they behave, even maybe their views, socially, politically, etc., you'll find that the things that come up for you are for a reason. Typically, they're reflecting something back on the inside of you that is bothersome for you too, because it's not in alignment. Typically, what shows up for you is something that reflects something back to you that you don't want to see. Typically, it is inviting you to do some exploration into the truth of who you are. And all of that work helps you to become the version of yourself that's required for tomorrow. So you can be mad, you can not like whatever it is that's out there, but that doesn't mean that it is not being placed in front of you for your good. And trusting God looks like saying, I don't like this, but what actually is it showing me about myself? I'm willing to go there and to see what I don't see. God, show me what's on the inside of me. That takes me into something I want to share with you before I go. So this is, for many of you know, that I launched my book earlier last month, so just under a month ago, and it's called Healing is Required. This book is, it's God's book. I always love to say I'm grateful to just be the scribe for it. At the end of the day, I had the opportunity to listen to God's wisdom about what healing is, why it matters, how we are connected, what God desires from us, and then to share, some of the things that I've learned in my healing journey about how to go about doing your healing work in alignment with God, in alignment with the highest possible outcome version of yourself. And one of the things that I talk about there is a practice of my praying and saying, God, show me me. And for, people who know me well, they know that I do not play about asking God that question. I sometimes want to run when God gives me the answer. And often I am blown away by I've heard this before. So why am I hearing it again? Because clearly I didn't get all the way through whatever the thing was. There's another layer for me to navigate. But saying, God, show me me, open the door for me to see myself more fully. And that is a journey. I believe it has been a part of the way I surrender myself before God for about 4 years, maybe longer. But it is a continuous thing that I say over and over again. Show me me, help me understand and see the parts of myself that I don't see. Help me to know what it is that is keeping me stuck, that is not allowing me to elevate. Help me see the way that I treat people. When something happens, when there's something that's out of alignment, I ask God, what's the role that I played in this? How could I have shown up differently? And I ask it from a place of such purity. I actually really desire God to show me. When we have that kind of heart, we desire to have a greater understanding of who we are and how people experience us. It changes the way we create connections. When we allow ourselves to see ourselves in truth, it makes it so much easier for us to see other people. It makes it so much easier for us to see other people and to give them grace, because we understand that they're not different than us. That at our core, people are inherently good. We desire the same thing. When we are in the truth of who we are, aligned at our highest, we want love. We want what God created for us to do to be what comes into fruition. So in this journey up ahead, the message is very clear for us. It's time for us to see what we don't see. And what we've talked about today is looking within yourself, to paying more attention to the people in our immediate vicinity, to trusting God to handle what's happening at a macro level. And the last thing that I would say to you is that it is really important for us to spend more time in that quiet, that alignment time with God to understand what God wants to show us. Had Noah been avoidant of God, he would not have gotten the clarity around direction for what to do. And we don't have to talk about what would have happened if it didn't happen, because we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? So at the end of the day, it's really important for us to begin to shift in a way that we are in deep alignment with what God says. The one thing I will release to you is that next year, there are going to be moments of mass confusion. Mass confusion. I've been seeing for a while now, God has been showing me it's like people who are like, which way do I go? And God has been saying over and over again, like to tell them that there are going to be moments where everybody's running off to one side and God is saying, go that way. And then the person's like, well, why would I go that way? And God's like, go that way. And typically when people run away, they're running away from something. You don't want to head in the direction of whatever it is they're running away from, right? You're like, I'm not going over there. But actually, in this instance, and what God is showing me, it's been the same every time I've seen it. God is like, I'm bringing you over there because there's protection for you that you just don't understand. And in our humanness, our fearfulness, we wouldn't do that. But when we have the relationship with God and we know that actually the real security and safety, the trust that we have is never misplaced when we put it in God's hands, we would just go and follow God, right? It would just be that simple. And so what God is saying in this moment is that it's so incredibly important for us to strengthen that relationship, because in the time of mass chaos, there is going to be this, the spinning of information. It is intentional and it is significant and it is so, the best way I can say it is this: when you hear after story, when the truth comes out afterwards, you're going to be blown away at what was created and orchestrated to get behavior to follow the pattern of whatever it was that was the desired outcome that was not God's. And you are going to be just like, the word that I'm hearing is like baffled, awestruck, like, who could even have conceptualized doing all of this in this way? You and I don't have to answer that. You already know. And God is saying, like, but if you're listening, if you're hearkening, if you're listening for me, if you know my voice, then you don't have to worry, because you will be positioned in a place where it is simply not of your concern. I see in like a perch. It's like you're in this perfect perch and you can just see all of what's happening and it's just not your issue. You feel connected to it because it happens in a world that you inhabit, but it's not your issue. You should be expecting to hear multiple messages from God every single day, because God says, I am speaking all the time, waiting for them to wake up, waiting for them to listen, waiting for them to trust, waiting for them to remember. I'm just speaking all the time, all the time. And for those of you who feel like you're not clear about your gifts, it's time for you to trust in a way that you haven't before. There are some phenomenal people that are skilled at helping you trust your gifts. Find your resources, pray, ask God to show you, get your resources so that you can rebuild that connection, because it already existed in you. None of us were designed without the ability to connect and know that we are hearing from God. And when I say hearing, I mean it in the broadest sense imaginable. We all have the ability to hear. The skill, that gift that God gave each of us may vary, but we can all hear. We can all know. We all have some way of being able to align and know that it is God. Every single one of us. So that is what I have for you today. God says to tell you, I'm making a way. I'm making a way. I am making a way. And so for whatever part of the path you have felt stuck on, I am making a way. I'm creating a way for you. You are not stuck, but this is the time for you to not look back. It is a time for you to be focused on where you are in this moment and be listening for my word when it is time for you to move forward. The preparation in this moment, it is all about your heart. It is all about you being in alignment with God, trusting yourself and knowing that when it is time, that God has you, that God has you. You can't stop the chaos. There just are some things that are beyond your control, but you can impact it, and you can definitely orchestrate the experience that you are having through your relationship with God. What that looks like, some people are like, well, what does that mean? Like, can I be in a safe house? Like, it's not that. It's about knowing that you are safe because you trust God, because you are so clear about how safety, about how security, about how provision, about how your health, like you're so clear that none of the things that the divine has the ability to do, that they do not extend all of that to you. All right, with that, I have to go. I wish you all peace and blessings. Thank you for tuning into this month's episode of the Divine Guidance on the Anika Apple Podcast. Again, the core message today was around what you don't see, and I hope that it has been enlightening to you and you've had the opportunity to see what you haven't seen. I want to just remind you that my book, Healing is Required, is available right now. You can get it on Amazon, and you can actually still get the ebook for a few more days at $1.99. And so if you like to read on your Kindle on your device, I would definitely make sure you grab that before the price goes up. There's also a QR code here in the corner that will take you to our website for the book. And we have some really cool packages. For those of you who are book club leaders, there's a great opportunity for you to get some tools and our official book club guide as a part of a package. And you can grab that with, I think, a total of 10 books. And so a great way to just grab the books in whatever community that you decide you want to read them, or if you want to use them for holiday gifts for your family, I definitely encourage you to use that package, because if you want to facilitate some discussions with your family members about the book, it will make it so easy for you. It's all done for you. It's really cool. Again, the book is called Healing is Required. And what I love, the one thing I will give you today, had the blessing of having one of my sisters earlier today was in a group chat, and someone was like, I got my book. And the other person was like, but wait till you start reading it. The feedback consistently is what I know to be true. You grab the book and healing begins to happen. And I look forward to your healing journey unfolding for you. I wish you all peace and blessings, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Anika Apple Podcast.